incident was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, Cosmic Family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
It's time to go inside the matrix. Inside the matrix with your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome everybody to Inside the Matrix. We want to wish everybody a happy new year and hope this year is going to be a great one for everyone. Our guest today is Alexandra Bruce. She's returning to us. She was back on the show in September, and we wanted to have her back on to get her insight and clues about what's going on in the world, because she's one of the best internet journalists out there. So welcome to the show, Alexandra.
Why, thank you. It's always fun to talk to you, Jimmy. You know, that interview you did in September was, I think, one of the best ones. You're so good.
You're
such a good listener.
It's sweet to say that. But yeah, you know, I try to stay out of the way as much as I can, because after all, when I have a guest, it's about you. It's not about me. And my intent is to help you get your point across or your information across. And that's the way I look at it. And as always, we ask people to keep an open mind about things. And I think most of our audience is pretty much that way. And, you know, we never try, and we're not trying to convince anybody of anything.
Well, neither am I. I mean, neither am I at all. And that's, yeah. You know, I get people who think that I are the ones who get upset, and they don't understand. That's not what I'm up to at all. Right. I don't care about being right. You know, I just care about the truth.
Yes, that's exactly my attitude as well, and my intent. And we share that. We want to get the truth out to people the best way we can. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's 100% right. But there are some things going on in the world which become fairly obvious once you look at them. And, you know, we're very much in a war. I always refer to this as World War III. You know, a lot of people think that's some kind of nuclear thing, and it could end up being that way. Hopefully not. But it's the war for the mind. It's Absolutely. The war of consciousness that's going on, that we're up against. So anybody that's actually paying attention out there is going to realize that. And, you know, we have some very psychopathic and crazy, you know, parasites running things on this this place we live in. Yeah. And that's the problem. And not enough of us have been paying attention long enough to really do much about it up until, you know, the last few years or so. And I think we're kind of making a dent, because it looks like they're pulling out all the stops. Wouldn't you say, Alexandra?
Oh, it's just, this is unprecedented, you know, yeah. And it's all, you know, under the guise of politics, when it's not about politics. I mean, yes, it really looks like the Democrats are like an enemy invading force that is trying to destroy the country, which is so weird. You know, as a lifelong Democrat, it's just so bizarre to, you know, to see that, and to not be such a partisan that I can't see that, because I have family members who don't see it because, you know, I guess they're partisan. Like, what? Since when is being a Democrat more important than being an American? I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, and I've experienced similar things, and I know a lot of other people have as well. And I always attribute that to the success of their programming. Their programming is, you know, they're using a lot of psychotronic weaponry, you know, against the people. Psychological manipulation, emotional manipulation that's going on constantly in the media. And unfortunately, if you're not aware of those things, you know, people are rather easily programmed.
Well, to me, it's so obnoxious, and it's so, yeah. It's just total projection. They're just accusing everybody else of what they've been doing and what they are doing. I mean, just like down to the whole, you know, the impeachment business based on the phone call, when we have it on videotape of Joe Biden actually bragging about doing what they're claiming that Trump did but did not do.
Yeah. it's mind-boggling, isn't it? I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling. You watch that video, and then you have to think to yourself, what in the world? How can they just totally ignore that? And why, why are they doing it? Well, it's obvious why they're doing it, but how can it be totally ignored? And then,
and how can it work? But
how can it? Yeah, exactly.
It's what I think is why, I think part of it, the doing the sort of the 180 inversion is that this plays into some weird, some satanic stuff. This is some black magic.
Yeah.
Because they're taking the truth of something and then they're just doing a 180 spin on it.
Yeah. So whatever they're doing, they're going to accuse Trump or anybody else that gets in the way of doing the very same thing. And because the mainstream media, for the most part, is absolutely complicit with them, they get away with it because there's nobody else out there that has a big enough audience that can say, hey, wait a minute, this is BS. I mean, Fox News does it to an extent, but there
was Alex Jones, but they took him down.
Yep.
And there's thousands of people, like you and me, and they've taken, us down in various, not as extremely, but it's, the stuff that I've experienced. I was deplatformed twice in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
He spoke in September.
Right.
I was really down and out. I was, really not in good shape at all. And it's just because of the possibility now that I see, of the potential for justice. It's sort of giving me a little more wind beneath my wings, as it were, because, I didn't do, the big tech censorship is something that only people who are really involved, with online publishing really understand.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you just sound like you're a hysterical dweeb who's, people don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah, it's it's been really hard. It's been so hard, but now this whole Iran thing is just a monkey wrench in all of that because it felt like something was going to break.
Mm-hmm.
In maybe John Durham or indictments are going to start coming down because they have to before it gets too close to the election.
Now, do you think Trump was really fully in on that, or do you think they just kind of pulled that off, like you said, is maybe some type of a distraction or misdirection, or just trying to create more problems to overshadow what's coming to them?
That's a really good question. I have no idea.
It really makes you wonder, though, because doing something like that, I mean, that's like taking a stick and poking it in the hornet's nest. I mean, it really is. It's this total arrogance to think that you can just do stuff like that. And number one, we should have never been in the Middle East anyway. We should have never been in Iraq. We should have never been in Afghanistan. And all the other countries we invaded over there and destroyed their infrastructure and destroyed their countries.
Media lying us into it,
Yeah.
Lying about everything, lying about 9/11, lying about the whole justification. That was a lie. The whole premise that never hung together. It was just as bad as everything that we're seeing, but see, it was still kind of new to us.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think a lot of us have become like, authorities on the topic of like psychological warfare at this point.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. I mean, there's literally it's become an actual industry where you have all these companies who have done the research, and of course, all this dates back to Operation Paperclip and the Nazis that were brought over here after World War II. They were already well down that road. To manipulating psychologically the populace.
And it was Goebbels, who that was his quote, was accuse your enemy of that what you're doing. I mean, that it's straight out of the Nazis' playbook.
Yeah, that and Edward Bernays.
And then Saul Alinsky, who was Hillary Clinton wrote her thesis on him.
Mm-hmm.
And on the book that he wrote, he dedicated his book to Lucifer.
Well, that tells you everything right there you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really mind-boggling, and we always wonder how in the world are we going to get this information out to people. So that's why we do what we do. But many times, I don't know if you feel this way too, but I know when I'm always kind of ranting and posting stuff on Facebook, and then I feel like I'm in an echo chamber because it's always the same people that are actually, listening or commenting. And I think it's gotten now to the point where no matter what you do, they have you sort of locked into your own little world in those social media platforms. So you may think that a lot of people have access to what you're having to say, but if they deem you to be an enemy of the global agenda, I think you pretty much get locked down into an echo chamber.
I think that's probably true. And again, it's all unprecedented, like Goebbels and Alinsky and, others, Bernays, as you said, were sort of crafting propaganda and psychological warfare, which is the same.
Mm-hmm.
To Bernays, it's one and the same thing.
Yeah.
In the early, 20th century, but they didn't have social media back then. So it's just the velocity of information is just unprecedented. And so, it almost seems like ages since September when we spoke before, because I've learned so much, I've understood so much.
Yeah, me too.
About this whole operation that I didn't yet. I was still very much at the effect of it, and I'm beginning to feel like I'm getting close to the summit of the mountain and not being able to see what the hell's going on. But, and because I found myself unable to speak to my beloved stepfather, who was really the greatest stepfather you could ever hope for, an angel of a man. But he was involved in the Obama campaign, and he was very proud of flipping Riverside County in Southern California, I think for the first time, flipping it blue, and, for Obama. And, he's like, come on, you can't just stop talking to me because of politics. And at the time, there weren't even any words. But now, like 2-3 months later, I could say, this is not politics. This is war.
It's way beyond politics now. It's literally a battle for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wonder, and I've mentioned this before on the show, I really wonder how many actual souled human beings are here.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Are there a lot of placeholders?
Right.
I really wonder about that.
Yeah, I do too. And I see that, especially in the Southwest, it definitely looks like these husks are walking around that have no soul in them. Worse, driving around.
Yeah. And then, obviously the psychopaths, if they have a soul, it's stuffed so far down that there's no relevance to it anymore.
Right.
But
That's a thought that I hadn't considered for a while. Who was it? Was it Uspensky or one of Gurdjieff? These guys would talk about. And my friend Laura Knight-Yadzik in France, who studied both extensively and wrote about this topic and wrote about ponerology, which is political ponerology is psychopathy scaled up to the political level.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's basically a tool of psychological warfare, and it was basically he was the guy who wrote that Luby something really long Polish name. He had escaped Poland, and he basically wrote how communism was effected in Poland and how they did it, on a psychological manipulation level. Mm-hmm. And with incredible pains of sneaking it out of the country to get it published. And anyway, to go back to your point, with these other, Eastern European philosophers who would talk about that there were some people who really, they're more like organic portals. And this is sort of dangerous territory because it's sort of dehumanizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny because I was really sort of obsessed with this idea for a while, about a decade ago or a little more. And I've stopped thinking about that. I think it's dangerous to think.
Well, it's probably not real productive to go down that road because we just don't know. I mean, I guess the superficial evidence would point to that because we have so many people that are just not interested. You know, they just kind of go along to get along. And
there's that, and then if you're on Twitter all day like I am, it's just stunning these shit-eating blue checks who actively lie in the most treason, or just it's the Democrats.
Yeah.
The House Democrats. I mean, what more vile form of life is there?
That's it. And, it seemed like they came up from nowhere, when Trump came on the scene, but they really didn't. They've always been there. But they've always gotten their way to the point where they didn't need to do anything like they're doing now because they were just able to, just game the system from every aspect. And now we're seeing how they've taken the foreign aid and gotten all these kickbacks.
Yep. So the thing is that although it is the Democrat Party, it's really not about the ideals of the Democrat Party as it, under JFK, for example. It's something that basically they have an alliance with the neocons. They're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not about, because the primary movers and shakers of what, this disgustingness are the DNC. They are probably pound for pound more corrupt at this juncture. But, 20 years ago, it was the neocons. It was Bush. It was 9/11. It was invading Iraq. And that was all on the Republican side. Yep.
And we can't say, as you mentioned, this is not really a partisan thing, although it certainly appears that
it takes on the guise of that. They're manipulating us to think that that's what it's really about when that's not what it's really about.
Yeah,
it's about control, and it's about crime. It's about covering up your crime and keeping power.
Exactly. And we've got, there's plenty of Republicans that are on the take as well. Absolutely. The corruption runs so incredibly deep. It makes one wonder, is it even possible to drain the swamp at this point? I mean, we should have started, 60, 80 years ago. Yeah. I mean, really, if that awareness was there, but it just wasn't.
Well, again, I think social media and the internet has had a huge hand in bringing this to light.
Well, that's it. And that's what we've got now. And that's the really saving grace, if there's going to be for us, is that we do have those platforms to communicate on for however long. We don't really know for sure at this point, right? Right.
We don't. So you wanted to talk about the top 10 stories.
Yeah, and I noticed that when because I get your emails every day, and I was looking at the top 10 that you had from 2019, the issues or topics, and I found that very relevant, and I think we should go through them if you got your list handy.
Sure.
And get started on. We got a few minutes for the break here, but let's get started. Just take number 10 or.
Yeah, which way? You want to start with number 10 or with number 1? It's funny.
Which is worse? I don't know.
Do a countdown or do a... you know what? Like, what's popular isn't necessarily, the coolest or most interesting. It's just somehow, it presses a button. So I'll just start with number 1.
Okay.
And that was this video by this sort of out-of-work actor guy who calls himself Mr. Reagan. That's the name of his channel on YouTube. And it was his incredible expose. He just, used publicly available information to put together a really shocking report about who Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is, and that she really represents an army of people just like her who have been actively groomed and trained and created by a Soros-financed group called the Justice Democrats.
Yep.
And so they did like a America's Got Talent sort of show thing.
Yeah, let's see who's going to be camera ready and appealing. I'm sure they did their
they did
group analysis and all that.
She won the audition, basically.
Yeah.
And it's it's terrifying, because we do have a generation of people who were not alive before there was an internet. So the internet is great because of the velocity of information.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's a lot of information that didn't get on there. Like, there's a kind of a perspective on history that's missing, because not everything, there's a certain, especially I think a lot of stuff from the 90s and just kind of didn't make it onto the internet because it was still it just didn't make it. So there's like this weird sort of blind spot in history, I find, about the internet. And I think a lot of millennials are woefully misguided about reality. I think like a great example is Colin Kaepernick screaming about Colin Kaepernick, who was the unemployed football player.
Right.
Complaining about the bombing, saying, the United States is always bombing, minorities and brown people. And it's just, that's like so not what the bombing is about. It's just like, he's so narcissistic that he thinks that because he's brown, everything is about brown people or something. It's just, it's like this Instagram generation where everything is just about you.
Yeah, and we see that across the board on all the social media platforms. It's just crazy. And then, you've got all these cutouts. What I always refer to them as cutouts. And Elon Musk is a good example of another one. Bill Gates, I would put in that. These are people that are propped up that are really. Some people think of Bill Gates as some kind of a genius or something with software. Well, no, he stole most of it. And he came from money. His father was a eugenicist. He's a eugenicist, and he's being propped up there for that.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway, we're coming up on the break. We'll continue on this thought pattern here as soon as we come back from the break. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with Alexandra Bruce. We'll be right back.
Of Inside the Matrix, Jimmy Brent.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, from the break. Just before we took that break, we were talking about cutouts in our world. When I say a cutout, I'm talking about someone that has been rather artificially placed into a position of influence or power just to fulfill a role. And they always have a story that, they came from nothing and there's huge success and all that. But these are mostly, especially the political ones lately, are Soros-backed cutouts like AOC.
Well, and Soros is very aggressively going for all the deepest bowels of our government, all the way down to, local county prosecutors, judges. There's what is it? Something justice. And then there's the Justice Democrats. And so he's financing, for example, the Jussie Smollett case in Cook County in Chicago, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
That woman who was the prosecutor who dropped the case after he had already been convicted or indicted on 16 felonies.
Right.
And she just dropped it. She was a creature of Soros. She had received like $600,000 from him for her campaign to become that prosecutor there in Cook County.
Yeah, and it's such a huge problem that people can be bought that easily, and you see it everywhere. You can tell these people, the ones that are squawking the loudest are the ones that are bought and paid for, the ones that don't want to lose their gravy train. And we can't discount the blackmail that's going on too.
Right. Well, have you heard of Tiffani Fitzhenry? She would be a great person for you.
Yes. I've reached out to her and I haven't been able to get her back from her yet. But yeah, and she had that I think it was today that she was supposed to have somebody on there talking about the pedophilia with the boy guy that was in the boy band, right?
Yes. I ran the preview to that. I haven't seen the full thing yet because, of course, it's all been about Iran today. But
right.
But yeah, so what she basically suggests that it's, and we've seen the roots of this. If you know your history and you know where to look, and you have smart friends who can tell you where to look, what's happening, it's just a doubling down and an acceleration of the kinds of stuff that the CIA has been doing forever.
Yep.
But and basically you have to understand that the CIA largely is not about United States national security. It's about
world dominance.
Right. Which again has nothing to do with the United States. It has to do with the people who own the right to issue money. It's about central bankers.
Yep.
And so this goes back. So it's like it's transnational, and that's what globalism is all about. That's who they are. These jurisdictions are just a fly in their soup. It's a pain in the ass. They would rather not have multiple jurisdictions and have just one. And maybe, separate ones for them to hide, their people to hide money in, possibly, financial jurisdictions in the Caribbean or whatnot. But they would just, that's what globalism is really about. It's about these central bankers, and they'll use whatever flavor of the month to whip you into it. And right now, the one that they're using is socialism on the kids. And I have 16 nieces and nephews, and most of them are all for it.
Because they don't know history. Right.
And a great book to tell people about is it's very short and easy to read, and it's basically about 100 pages long. It's by Diana West, and it's called The Red Thread. And it's a search for ideological drivers inside the anti-Trump conspiracy. And she shows how people like Christopher Steele, James Comey, John Brennan, Nellie Orr, her husband Bruce Orr, and on and on and on. The people who really were involved in this takedown were all like hardcore leftists, if not straight, registered communists. In the case of John Brennan, former CIA director.
Exactly. Yeah, communist and Muslim, avowed Muslim.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different agenda as well, along with Obama.
It's part of it too. Muslim, that during World War II, the Nazis went in and trained the Libyans, trained the Egyptians, and the Syrians. They're what do you see about it? It's this fascism. It's totally Nazi. You have to, maybe grow, take a bigger look at what fascism really is. It's just like a different brand. It's the same. It's the same stuff. It's the same completely unremitting, unrelenting thing. And that's this, Islamism, if you will. Because Islam has been around for over 1,000 years and it hadn't been turned into the thing that it's become.
Well, it was weaponized.
It was weaponized, exactly.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing all over the place. And every kind of technology there has been weaponized against us, because you have a small group of people who want to own and control the world, and actually they already do for the most part, but they want to expand that to absolute totalitarian full spectrum dominance.
Yep.
And that's why all the stops are being pulled out right now, and we can see it all happening. It's like, people, can't you see this? What's behind this? And they've gotten into the heads of the kids at colleges and schools and saying, hey, get socialism. It's so great. Free everything. Free healthcare. Free school. Whatever you want, we'll give it to you free. Of course, you won't have any choice anymore. We'll just give you what we want to give you, which will support our agenda. But don't mind that.
Yeah, it's really, really scary. It's really scary because these people aren't dumb. These, oldest niece and nephew went to the best schools in the United Kingdom. And they're both like hardcore socialists. Mm. You know, they rub shoulders with the elite of the elite of the UK, and that's where they ended up.
And you know, I was a bit disappointed to see somebody like Candace Owens, who I really had a lot of respect for, you know, hook up with basically English royalty. And now she's going to be kind of herded into place, I think, because of that. And her agenda will become narrower and will become more of an agenda that will serve the globalist agenda eventually. You know, she's not there yet, but when I saw her talking about, you know, hunting animals, you know, because her new husband loves to, you know, kill animals for sport in Africa because it's just good time, right?
Oh God!
And then she was trying to justify that and saying, "Oh, you know, well, if we didn't kill these animals, they'd be out of control and they'd attack all the village people." And I'm like, no. No, that's not it at all. You've got sick people who enjoy taking high-powered rifles and shooting defenseless animals and watching them suffer and die. It's sick. And so when I saw her justifying that and saying, "Oh yeah, I understand why they do it now. It's a good thing," you know, no. And they actually and she was explaining how they raise animals. You know, they actually have them reproduce so that they can kill them. And so how is that actually helping Mother Nature? No, Mother Nature can, you know, do its own work as far as things like that go. You know, if there's not enough food for animals, they die.
Well, I think it used to be a thing where they would have, you know, they needed to cull the elephant herd or whatever because they were like eating all the trees and whatever, and it was. But now that they've, you know, killed all of them and they're like going extinct.
Yeah, I think that's not necessary. Yeah, it's just another example of crazy stuff. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up was about all these Somalis brought into Minnesota in order to get, I forget it, Ilmar. You know?
Omar.
Yeah, in order to get her into office. And now we see that she married her own brother, you know, to get him in as a U.S. citizen and for reasons of schooling and all that kind of stuff. But again, it's just like Biden. You know, you got all this stuff that, you know, campaign violations and, you know, money spent to her boyfriend and all this kind of stuff. But where is justice here? Where is the Justice Department? It's absent. They do nothing about any of this stuff.
Yeah, we do not have a functioning Department of Justice, which, of course, the FBI is part of the DOJ, by the way. Yeah. So neither are working at all. And so, yeah, it was, I think today or on Friday, maybe, it was, what's his name? Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch. Right. He sued for all his.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I wish him success in that because, yeah, he's one of the few guys out there, you know, his organization, Judicial Watch. I so admire what they're doing because, you know, they're doing the job of the Justice Department in a lot of ways because they're investigating things.
It's scary. It's like everything needs to be shit canned. It's just a disgusting mess. These people are not working. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're stealing. They're just living high on the hog and
exactly
garbage.
They're parasites living off of, you know, the wealth or the embezzled money through taxes or whatever from people. And that's what they do. And they're perfectly happy with that. And that just blows my mind because any human being wouldn't do that.
We really saw that this class of people, these parasites during the impeachment inquiry, with all of these like Soviet-born people who
Yeah, Soviet and Ukraine people.
right.
How did they get in there? Well, you got to go back to like Kissinger and Brzezinski. These guys. How in the hell did they get into those positions? They weren't even born here.
Right, and then they're acting so huffy. And I don't know if you're on Twitter, but Lisa Page has taken to Twitter in the last couple of weeks, hardcore.
Well, I saw where she was suing the Justice Department and the FBI for letting her private text on government equipment, right? Letting her off.
No, she says, I had to speak up because Trump, during his rallies, he would say, "Oh, I love you, Lisa." He'd pretend to be Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. And it was just like a comedy routine. And she was so upset, like he's, using some old school feminist BS arguments about like, right. Whatever. It's like, because I'm a woman, and it's like, it's not about you being a woman. It's about you being a traitor. It is about you expecting to have Fourth Amendment rights on an FBI issued phone that we paid for, while you try to commit treason. It's like, no. And it's just, and so all these people have the same lawyer, by the way, the same law group, and they're called Lawfare, the Lawfare group.
Oh, okay.
And so they're all getting the same advice, and they're all doing the same thing, which is to act like petulant bitches when they're like traitors and seriously deserve to be hanged for treason.
Yeah, isn't Strzok suing too?
Yes. And the reports, and so I need to look into this a little better, because they were saying he was, the report said his First Amendment rights had been violated. That's not what had been violated. If anything, it would be Fourth Amendment rights to privacy, but not on an FBI phone.
It's just like if you work for a corporation and you use their email and their equipment, and then you start, writing secret messages to your secret girlfriend, and then you expect that that's all, your private stuff. No, it's not. It belongs to somebody else.
And so these guys are spies. Like, what? It's just bizarre. Like, you're working for a spy agency.
And you don't understand that somebody may look at that at some point?
Like, like normal people working for like dumb, like office equipment stores know more about how they can't do that than the FBI people.
Yeah. Well, I think, it goes back to what everybody's always said. They never, ever expected Hillary to lose. And if Hillary got in, well, everything works, Nobody's ever going to look into any of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of it, but still, operational security is operational security. I mean, even please, it's ridiculous.
It's mind-boggling. It really is. And then you have to wonder.
They're pathetic.
Yeah, you have to wonder how many more cutouts are going to try and put in this next election. I understand there's a whole bunch of ex-CIA people are running again.
Yeah.
And these people miraculously get all this huge funding. From the Soros crowd and others.
That's the other thing. The $50 million Netflix deal that Obama got, the $65 million deal from Crown one of these big publishing companies that's owned by Pearson.
Explain how that works.
Okay, so Obama passed Common Core, the Common Core curriculum, and then the publishing company that was going to get to do all the textbooks for this new Common Core curriculum was the Pearson Publishing Group. And that was like a $300 million government contract to do that. And so then he leaves office, and then he got a $65 million deal from like one of the a company that's owned by Pearson. Gave him his $65 million. So that's a kickback right there.
Of course. And then Big Mike got one too, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh,
I should say, well, Michelle, I refer to that person as Big Mike, but a lot of people get really upset over that. But,
Becoming. I mean, it's almost, she's laughing at you. Becoming. I mean, please. That's the title of her book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm becoming a woman.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Joan Rivers had it right. And
yeah.
if you don't know what I'm talking about, just
look on YouTube, Joan Rivers and Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
So you'll find the answer right there. But yeah, the world that we live in is so completely fake and contrived, and that's just a prime example of it, and how.
Oh, but it's gotten so weird, where like you have Elisa Page complaining about, like bitching on Twitter, actively bitching about the president when she was committing treason against him.
Yeah.
Just like that. So that parody sites, you can't even tell anymore. It looks real because
so much of it is. Yeah. Yeah. It's just beyond crazy. I don't know. I just keep shaking my head. So, all right. I think we touched on number 1. So what do we got next?
So next is very weird thing. And, I don't know what to say about, this. This has to do, the title of this video is California Firemen Find Signatures of Directed Energy Weapons. And this has to do with like the Camp Fire, the Paradise Fire in California in late 2018. And so it was like, it went viral early in 2019. And in fact, he wrote on he contacted me, one of these firemen. And so what they said is that, they reported that plastics that were attached to metal had completely melted, whereas plastics standing alone were completely unmolested, And so you've seen the pictures of so-called forest fires where the trees are standing and the houses are just pulverized.
Yep.
Really, like out of some kind of an alien, out of Independence Day or something. That's what it looks like. And then some people reported what they said was laser beams coming from the sky.
Yeah, and there were videos showing it.
Right. And, but low quality shot with phones or whatever. So you don't really know if are you looking at a flare? What are you really looking at? So my point in all this is there are 2 points. One is that I don't know if this is true, but what's the story that matters here is that many people there whose houses were reduced to rubble, surrounded by unharmed trees, they believe that directed energy weapons zapped their homes.
And we've seen pictures of the actual technology, the
right.
planes that have these weapons in their nose cone.
Right. They can be mounted on planes, on drones, on satellites, on, land-based, platforms. And basically what directed energy weapons are, they're the 2 main ones. There might be others, there's probably no limit to the applications, what you can do with different frequencies, from listening. I just heard something like the whole move to LED light bulbs was for better surveillance ability, because you can tap into LED bulbs and basically listen in on conversations 300 feet away.
Yes, you can. And that goes along with a technology called Li-Fi, not Wi-Fi, but Li-Fi. And that was the intent. And I was really happy to hear Trump say that he was going to bring back incandescent bulbs. And,
that was incredible. That's like, wow, that's like a dream come true, because it really seemed like this is the end. We're just being marched, down the plank, into the shark-infested sea, It was like, this is it. It's over. No more real light bulbs. We have to use these $6 made in China things that would basically toxically destroy your trash dump because they have horrible chemicals in them.
Yeah, and they're not good light either.
No, it's terrible light. Yeah, and apparently it can actually cause optical damage.
So we know we're under attack from every angle. And
so where it really used to be, I guess this is the year that Epstein did not kill himself, basically. And so this is like when I guess the gloves are off, because it's like everything I've been publishing for 9 years, and I was like, well, maybe this is like paranoid or whatever, but here we go. Now it's just like, no, no, this is real.
Well, not only that, we're seeing the same exact thing times 100 in Australia with these directed energy weapons.
Yes.
It's crazy,
terrifying, terrifying. The lower population, I guess a less litigious population, they can, they are just, wow. It's like the California fires, times 1,000.
Yeah.
It's unprecedented what's happening there right now.
It's absolutely horrible. And I don't know.
Max Egan has done some great reporting on that. He says it has to do with water rights and private interests are selling water rights to Chinese nationals. And then Chinese law says that if anyone comes at, seizes your property or whatever, that basically that property is now Chinese property if you sell it to a Chinese national. It's now part of China, as far as Chinese law is concerned.
Oh, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Well, once again, we're coming up on the break. I wanted to thank Douglas. He gave us a nice compliment. He said, really good program tonight. Thank you, Douglas. And I want to thank everybody else who's listening in live. And please feel free to post your questions for Alexandra. And we're going to take a short pause right here. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with Alexandra Bruce, our guest, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Once again with our guest, Alexandra Bruce. Alexandra, we're going through your top 10. I think we kind of touched on the first two. Was there anything you wanted to add to that second one with the...
we could just get more into the science of directed energy, but, I guess I'll just quickly say that masers and lasers are forms of amplified coherent electromagnetic radiation, and both frequency ranges are used in various directed energy weapons. That are, and what they have is the ability to be invisible and inaudible. They're immune to gravity and wind and Coriolis forces. They travel at the speed of light and have a near infinite range. And so they're actually good for space warfare, too.
And I've seen that the Chinese have basically a laser rifle, which can take somebody out from, I don't know, half a mile away.
Sure, of course. I bet we have them too.
Yeah.
They have pinpoint accuracy. They have incredible, because they don't deviate. It's light, it's just using, it's the same principles as, lasers are light, right? So that's just wanted to, for people want to know what. So that's one form of directed energy weapon, but, so lasers and masers. So, lasers use light and masers use microwave frequency ranges.
Which is just a different range of light in the light spectrum, right? Yeah, because everything's light. Actually, even sound is light. We perceive light as sound in say 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. And then, oh gosh, somebody pointed out the actual frequencies of the visible light spectrum, which is rather small,
tiny,
that we actually see light. But a lot of what you're talking about is actually invisible to us.
Right. So
if somebody was planting a beam on you, you wouldn't even know it.
Right.
You'd never see it.
And that brings in sort of the conversation about 5G, which operates in millimeter wave, not microwave, so bigger. Or is that smaller?
Smaller, very, very tiny, and it interferes with your internal organs in your brain very heavily.
It's really scary what's happening. I don't know there are just so many fronts to tackle at the same time. Not the least of which is the CIA. Once again, it's I think our whole lives, if you've been somewhat aware of what's been going on, you know that the CIA has staged coups all over the world.
Yep.
Most recently in Ukraine, but, all over Latin America. I know this because I'm half Brazilian, and that's why I'm maybe more aware than most. And I think in general, that's why I'm more aware, because I always grew up with more than one narrative and being able to really see two worlds at the same time. And, so now, I never in my life expected them to turn on the United States, and that's what they're doing right now with Trump.
When I think of CIA, I think Nazis, because it was the Operation Paperclip after World War II, which brought thousands and thousands of them over, and they literally merged with the OSS. Get it? SS. Again, you get that SS in there to form the CIA. And as far as I'm concerned, what we're seeing now with the CIA is the proliferation of the Fourth Reich. Absolutely.
Totally agreed. But then if you understand who created the EU were also Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And that the EU and this whole centralization, the whole globalization thing, it's them all over again. It actually ends up being so simple because they are monopolists. They're globalists. They want to monopolize everything. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think it's become more, in our lifetimes, maybe when we were young, they didn't have such a lock on everything, but it's just, and especially I think under Bush and Obama, it just went into some kind of a hyper drive. And this is coming back to the work of Tiffani Fitzhenry, where she says, and then I've confirmed that this is true, and it's been confirmed so many other ways too, in other stories that I've covered this year. But just to focus on her and just to use that as an example of how basically anyone who rises to any kind of level, like you were talking about Bill Gates before, mm-hmm. It's because they're owned. It's because they're controlled, and they are enabled to become the chosen one.
Yep.
To become that person, and then they're owned. And a really good example of that right now is Michael Bloomberg.
Yep.
Having to, because the Democratic Party has not raised anything like it. None of the candidates in the party as a whole have raised anything close to what Trump has raised, and the Republicans, but Trump in particular. And so it was time to call Michael Bloomberg, and he is being told to give $500 million to do all kinds of disruptive, very George Soros type of things. Like I just read that he's hired all kinds of anti-Trump lawyers to go disrupt all the agencies where, Trump policies, deregulation policies are happening, to try to overturn them and sue and fight against the stuff that Trump has been doing. But also, he's expected to dump $500 million in his presidential bid in advertisements and God, and the other ways that this can play out, as I said, hiring lawyers to work at various government agencies to overturn Trump policies. So, and it's not like just, is he, out of the goodness of his heart doing this? No.
No.
They're like, it's time to pay the bill, Mr. Bloomberg.
Yep. And that kind of reminds me of the, those in that club, they have those satanic rituals and the sacrifices. So, when it comes time for you to perform, you either perform or you're going to have somebody very close to you just sort of disappear.
Right.
And that we see that all the time. I mean, it's just so crazy and mind-boggling that these people are able to get away with this stuff, and that there's enough people that can be bought to help them, that are willing to sell their souls, like
Adam Schiff.
Oh.
Who, I don't know if you know, and this is the same guy who's met some of these, they're people from the committee. That's what they're called. That's what they call themselves. It's the committee. They don't call themselves Illuminati.
Mm-hmm.
They call themselves the committee. And at the top, it's like 30 guys. And they're in Switzerland. And so Adam Schiff was Bob Nichols, who was like the biggest cocaine dealer in Southern California. And he was importing cocaine into the Cabazon Indian Reservation and laundering it through the casino there.
Oh, convenient.
Yeah. So that's where Freeway, if you've heard of Freeway Ricky Ross, that's where he was. That was his supplier. And guess who his attorney was?
Who?
Adam Schiff.
Oh, perfect.
So that was one of his first jobs. I mean, he was a kid back then, Adam Schiff, in the 80s.
Wow. Yeah, when you know their history, you could see. And these people are they're so psycho when you see them just talk about, and make these speeches in Congress, and they're like rabid dogs, and like Pelosi. Oh my God!
Oh, how does this
possessed demon?
How can Democrats be okay with this?
Yeah, I mean,
how can Democrats not be saying, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah, and she seems totally drunk to start with. She sort of staggers around and then finds the podium and then just starts ranting all this bizarre stuff.
No, it's like you wonder how she can even be standing. Like, how can she even function at all? It's like,
doesn't really... anybody else see this? I mean, if you're a hardcore Democrat or whatever, do you look at that and just go, "Oh yeah, she's perfectly all right"?
I don't know. It's just crazy. It's such a bad look. No, I mean, really, this is like what happens when a crack whore lives to be 80 years old. I mean,
oh, that was awesome. And you always make me laugh, Alexandra. I'm telling you, people, you need to get on Alexandra's Facebook feed and look at the memes that she posts. They are the most, I don't know where you find them or if you make them, a lot of them yourself, but
all over the place. Yeah.
They are the most hilarious memes you'll ever see. I mean, I've spit my coffee out many times looking at those. And, and we have to keep a sense of humor about these things because otherwise we just go crazy. It's so insane, and you have to laugh.
Yeah. I mean, it's like this, it used to be living well is the best revenge. And, and so laughing, humor is a way to, so the next story, so that's it. So,
okay.
Adam Schiff took a huge bribe from Mr. Igor Pasternak in 2013.
Out of Ukraine, right?
Yeah, from Ukraine. And he's also probably got some sexual deviancy issues. There are allegations that have not yet, been legally tried, but there are rumors that he's deeply disturbed sexually.
Oh, yeah. There were allegations against him. George Webb, I believe, found some stuff that he was involved with about, they have these offshore little yachts, and that they take these excursions with young boys and girls with these politicians. And, that there was a story that came out about Schiff being involved with one of those. Wouldn't surprise me a bit. He looks like such a pervert anyway when you look at him with those bug eyes and the...
weird. Yeah, and he's Ed Buck, the guy who literally got off on killing people with drugs. And
yeah, at his house, right?
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 people, in a row.
2 died and 1 almost died. 1 got revived. So finally, when the third one, ran into an emergency room and said, was able to tell them where he had been, that they finally arrested him. But that's what it took.
Yeah, but you'll see him get off too. If he does get a sentence, it'll be just a slap on the wrist, and just like the rest of these crazy people, that they just Weinstein. What happened to him?
Well, there are many cases. I mean, there was a huge settlement recently, and that story isn't over yet. He still has more cases to go through.
Yeah.
So that's it. So basically, Adam Schiff is a CIA attorney, okay, and he has been for a long time, for decades, or 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a story that got a lot of traffic was Steve Pieczenik talking about the Mossad-Epstein connection.
Oh, yeah.
And he said that this is not just, so Steve Pieczenik, worked for the State Department, worked for the CIA. And he said that, so this is not just, some guy in his mother's basement. Okay.
Right.
And then this is what he, and so not only that, this is what's crazy. He says that the Jeffrey Epstein case touches on both 9/11 and on the future of Israel. And he says that the takedown of Epstein is a warning to Israel to make peace with Palestine or else. That's what he says. And he goes on to say that Israel was involved in 9/11 and in the stand down of the United States, the NORAD stand down. And he says that this was confirmed to him by Paul Wolfowitz,
who was heavily involved,
as well as by Wolfowitz's deputy, and also by 2 Israeli Mossad operatives who Pechenik interrogated.
Well, we have the dancing Israelis. We have the Israeli so-called students that had boxes and boxes of explosives in their place.
Absolutely. So that was one of the higher rated. We'll continue that conversation when we talk about something closer to another one of the videos that went viral too.
Okay, well, hold that thought. I got a question from Skype, and I want to throw it at you real quick.
Sure.
Brian from Skype says, so what do we think will be the October surprise that will come out against Trump or against any of the Dem candidates in 2020 before the election? You know darn well they've got some more crazy accusations and stories that they're going to come up with,
Well, I think that they're out of ammo with Trump. Literally, they've been at it for 3-4 years now. And if there was really any there, it would have already happened. I think.
You don't think they're saving anything?
No, I think they're out of ammo for Trump, not for these other people. These other people are criminals, and John Durham hopefully will indict and arrest and prosecute many people in the FBI and in the DNC.
I was thinking that they were going to hold off until this year with all of that because it would be fresh in the minds of the voters.
It could be, but what I've heard is that basically there were a handful of generals who were so angry at what Obama did to the military, defanging. He fired I don't know how many officers, like hundreds.
He did.
And he funded so many things, and Trump complains about how there was literally no ammo left. And so Trump was on a list, but he wasn't number 1 on the list. He was number 3 on the list. And they had to go over everything and make sure that he was bulletproof. So he doesn't really have, when it finally comes to them they'll get his taxes, there won't be anything there. That much, I believe that. I don't think that there's anything horrible on Trump. I don't think, I think that they would have, I think you've seen them be desperate, and I think that they're out of ammo.
I hope you're right. Okay, just that was a little sidetracked, but let's keep on with our countdown here.
So what Pechenik is saying is that actually it was Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father was a muckety-muck in the Mossad, and who, when he died, he was eulogized by I forgot which, might have been Ehud Barak or one of these people, who said, he did more for Israel than anyone. Yep.
I believe there were several ex-Mossad chiefs that spoke on his behalf.
Right. And so that's what that was. And basically that is a whole system. And unfortunately the video that really speaks to this whole thing did not rank in the top 10 or anywhere close to it. But to me, it was like the most jaw-dropping and earth-shattering video that I ran, I think, all year, because it really encapsulated everything. Let me see if I can find it. It was an interview by Sean at the SGT report of he's a metals trader from England named Mark Anthony Taylor.
Okay.
And here it is. Basically, in trying to get to the bottom of how and who is manipulating the gold and silver prices, he stumbled onto the Epstein blackmail thing. And when he realized that the head of J.P. Morgan, or one of the major branches of J.P. Morgan, which is, and Deutsche Bank and all these banks are manipulating, the gold and silver prices, right?
Right.
And buying all of it, right? And so in the course of that, he found out that the heads, like, one of the heads was absolutely groomed and created, I think that basically by Epstein. And then I think what he says is that the Mossad controls the CEOs of every major bank that participates in the central banking system globally, worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And if you understand what that means, is that so then all these all the big banks like Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, all
Citibank,
Citibank, all the ones that participate, that's just in the United States, and they're the ones in the other countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So any project, so basically this is the way for the committee to have control over what projects get financed. What movies get made, what, bridges and tunnels and roads get built. You need loans for everything, for all these things.
Yep.
And so basically then that's how they control the corporations. And who gets to become a golden boy and who doesn't.
Yep. Always boils down to the money and who can be bought. The
ultimate choke point.
Yep.
And so that's an amazing, and so the title of that video on my website is Bombshell, the Obama-Gchq plan to destroy Trump. And it's really one of the most earth-shattering. It really, if you want to see the blueprint of how the globalists control the world, that's the interview. And in fact, I got a letter back from the head of the Brexit party after I ran that, and she said, "Thank you."
Awesome. Yeah. So give them your website so they can go look that up. It's
ForbiddenKnowledgeTV.net, and there's two search fields, but near in the navigation bar, there's like a thing that looks like a magnifying glass. Mm-hmm. And you just click on that, and it gives you a field to type something in, and just type in Obama-Gchq. The GCHQ is the UK's NSA. It's their national security agency, the General Communication Headquarter.
Right. So I say to everybody out there, get on Alexandra's site, get on the mailing list.
It's free.
Support her on her site. Where else can they support you at?
Well, I mean, the subscription is free, and I try to keep it, it's free. And, so I put a lot of ads on everything and try to make money from.
Yeah, but if somebody wants to directly support you, do you have a way for them to do that?
Yes. In the same navigation bar where you find the magnifying glass, it says contribute.
Okay.
The contribute page where you can see a PayPal, and you can see, Bitcoin and I think Ether ways to donate. You can also an address where you can send a check.
Wonderful. Yeah, and we need to support people like Alexandra.
Yeah. I mean, I've been platformed. It's really, they really are trying to turn me into a homeless woman. I mean, that's what they're up to for sure.
Because you're putting a dent in there, and that's a big compliment to you and your work. All right, so what's the next one? We'll just kind of throw it out there because we only have about a minute left before the next break, and boy, this is flying by again.
Oh, this is a great story that is so not covered. It's so hot. The name of this video is The Man Who Knew Seth Rich. John Mark Dougan speaks from exile in Moscow. John Mark Dougan worked for the sheriff department of Palm Beach County in Florida.
Oh, I remember that. That was great.
He's a crazy, crazy guy who has Tourette's syndrome. So it doesn't really, because it's famous. I think it was made famous in the 90s in some movie. It made people swear, uncontrollably.
Okay, let's hold that thought. We'll be right back. We're coming up against the hard break. So you're listening to Inside the Matrix with Alexandra Bruce. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back once again for our final segment here with Alexandra Bruce. Alexandra, where were we on our countdown?
We were at number 5, and it was The Man Who Knew Seth Rich. John Mark Dougan speaks from exile in Moscow. And John Mark Dougan is this former cop from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And he was a cop, and he was also, on the side, he published with cop whistleblowing sites about corruption in police departments all over the United States. Mm-hmm. And he started to really piss off his...
Oh, yeah.
So he was the publisher of, so he was known as one of these, he had a whistleblowing site. And so it was in this capacity that he says that he was contacted a few times, and he kind of blew him off a few times by Seth Rich, the DNC staffer who stole the emails from the Clinton campaign. Mm-hmm. And wanted to get them published. And he, Seth Rich was a Bernie-crat, and he was really pissed at what the DNC did in 2016 to his campaign. And so after blowing Seth Rich off a couple times, John Mark Dougan finally said, okay, and he drove up very quickly. Literally, it was like a hit and run. He drove up from Florida to D.C., grabbed a thumb drive from him at 4:00 in the morning on a street corner, and drove back.
Wow.
The next morning, after he had downloaded all this stuff onto his computer, the FBI raided his house.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
So they didn't arrest him, but they took all his computers and stuff. They didn't take the thumb drive, but they saw what he had from Seth Rich. And so it was getting bad. So he knew he had to leave, and he took, he borrowed his aunt's blonde wig, and he did all this stuff. And he drove to Canada, and flew to Turkey, and then got to Moscow somehow. And he now has a political asylum in Moscow. And so that's when he took it back up with Seth Rich, because he had the thumb drive. And he created a website that was hosted out of Malaysia. But so that's maybe where the Russian footprints are on the DC Leaks website. It's because he was in Moscow setting up the website from Moscow. But he said, he had no money, and he didn't have any language skills or anything. The only reason why he went to Moscow is because he dated some Russian babes on the internet. And he liked it. So he had been there before, and he liked it. So he went back, and he loves it. He says Moscow is amazing. And so that's just what's in this particular video. But what emerged just like a couple of weeks ago, is that he had a friend who worked in the Miami, I think, police department, who gave him a terabyte worth of Epstein surveillance footage, the footage that Epstein was getting on everyone on the toilet and in their bedrooms.
Oh my God.
So he had a terabyte of that stuff, and that made it to Moscow, and he's given it to 10 people. He has a dead man switch, and he says, I didn't even want to look at it because literally looking at it is illegal, right? It's child porn. So, but he's like, I have it because, this cop was trying to cover his ass. By the way, that cop died at the tender age of 50, like out of the blue. He was investigating when Epstein back in 2005 and 6 or whatever, when that was happening, and so he was trying to cover his own ass in that situation and gave it for safekeeping to John Mark Dougan. And now John Mark Dougan has taken it to Russia. And so the reason, he would never have said anything about it if he hadn't seen a story in the British tabloids about how it was alleging that John Mark Dougan had given it to the Kremlin. And he's like, how the hell did they know that I have this footage? Then he had to sort of backtrack it. And so that's a whole separate story. But he thinks basically that MI5 hates Prince Andrew and wants to destroy him.
Oh.
and that they're working with the FBI, and that's the FBI had told MI5 about the video, but he has not confirmed or denied that he gave it to Russia, but he did say that he gave it to a bunch of people for safekeeping as a dead man switch. He needed money. He probably did sell it to Russia, is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next video is Behind the Green Mask, Agenda 21. And this sort of ties back to the Paradise Fires of late 2018.
Yep.
And, it's just been really such a wild ride for the past few decades as a total, liberal, New York liberal. And reading this stuff and thinking it's kind of, fringe and kind of out there and all, tinfoil hat and it's true. It's true. So basically this is about Rosa Coyer. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she's an activist in California, trying to raise awareness about Agenda 21. She was involved with, property assessments and, the legal framework of properties of real estate.
Yep.
And she began to see this very nefarious thing happening because it's coming from without, and it's always coming with different names. And it's not coming from within the community; it's coming from outside of the community. These regulations that they're trying to put on California real estate, And so, so the United Nations Plan for Sustainable Development is a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that's real. And so she says, it's never rolled up by name. It's carefully avoided. That's why it keeps on being reincarnated into different things. Right now, it's the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. And so she's just been amazing. And this video was very viral. And then, so here's the other one about the Twin Towers and about those, the dancing Israelis. So this one was, Who Rigged the Twin Towers? And it's by this guy who has the most hardcore Long Island accent. It's just amazing. It's amazing. How can you even talk? I mean, I live on Long Island, and it's just amazing. Like his is like, it's so classic. It's awesome. So, anyway, so basically, he talks about the E-team, those students who lived on those high floors for however, like a couple of months in the South Tower, or the North Tower rather, and how exactly where they were camped out with where you can see pictures where there are boxes of demolition fuses, like literally in the picture. Literally.
I saw it. Yep.
Is exactly where the plane went in to the North Tower. It's exactly. So they wired all those windows and that whole area.
If there was a plane. Right?
There was a plane. There was no plane. That first plane, they really never got it on camera anyway. Yeah,
they put CGI images on all the news
on the second they never got captured the first plane. And that's the one where they were. It was the North Tower.
Yeah.
Remember, I lived a quarter of a block away from those buildings.
Wow.
I was not, thank God, not there. I was out of town for the first time in 6 years when it happened.
Wow.
And I couldn't fly home because there was no flying for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I got to go there, and I had to move out with inhaling all that dust. There's no words whatsoever for that whole thing, which we went through the last time.
Probably the most in-your-face psyop ever.
Really, that's when, I don't know if you've ever heard of Michael Hoffman, who is sort of this radical, he's like this fundamentalist Catholic who lives in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He was a New Yorker, I think. He worked for the Associated Press.
Okay.
and I guess just got disgusted and, ran for the hills. But he wrote a really seminal and important book called Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare that was published in 1992. And, he's the one who really introduced this whole idea that you see a lot of sort of neophytes who never even read his book talk about how these mass consciousness events are really a form of an alchemical satanic like processing. Like we're being processed with trauma
and rituals.
Yes, right. And so he wrote the book on that in 1992, and he's
wow.
And that's Michael Hoffman. So that's that. Who rigged the Twin Towers? Next is Neuralink. The War Against Humanity goes mainstream. This was
Elon.
Yes. Now this was forgetting who made this video because I'm not looking at my webpage, but this is about the Neuralink, this implantable chip. We've been hearing about being microchipped, ever since David Icke became famous for talking about the microchipped humanity. Yeah. Also in the early 90s. I bought the book at the time. And then it kind of went away because there were lawsuits. People were developing cancers at the implantation sites of these, of the RFID, Verichip or whatever that company was. And so it kind of went away, but now it's back and it's different. It's not that big old thing. It's these very light wires that are just kind of stuck into your brain. Mm-hmm. And, so, yeah, I mean, so basically the same guy who told us that runaway artificial intelligence is
exactly
going to eat us alive is telling us that the only way we're going to fight back is by incorporating it into our own brains. And so that's what this video, so that was Greg Reese. Greg Reese made this video. He's incredible. He makes videos for InfoWars. He does them himself. He's sort of like a contractor for InfoWars, and he's really good at music and editing and the right tempo and the right amount of information, and he's just really, really good at putting these stories together. He's excellent.
Wonderful.
So I definitely subscribe to the Greg Reese YouTube channel. They're always great. His reports are excellent. So the next one is, does society realize it's being initiated? And this is by Truthstream Media, who are also used to work for InfoWars and are now very independently successful. Of course, their channel is being horribly suppressed. These are some of the smartest, most gifted, and just excellent. They're excellent filmmakers. They're excellent researchers and reporters. They have everything so right. And in a just world, they would be like the biggest, they would be getting, Nobel Prizes and stuff, okay, and Academy Awards and Pulitzers. They'd get everything. But what we find is that all those awards are for people that are owned by the committee.
Yep.
And that's basically, comes back to, that's the work of Tiffani Fitzhenry that is confirmed by that guy, Mark Anthony Taylor, who discovered it on his own when he was looking into the currency, the metals pricing manipulation. Mm-hmm. And then also is confirmed by a retired special ops Marine friend of mine who met some of these guys. And he's like, this is how it works. The committee basically decides who's going to be successful and who isn't. Like if you're going to, if you're going to be big, you're not going to be big unless they let you.
That's right. And it goes across the board.
And own you.
Yeah. Whether it's sports, entertainment, everything. And
that's why they all have to spew this Green New Deal, climate change garbage. It's at the tip of a gun that they all do this. Mm-hmm. Unless they're just stupid and believe that nonsense.
I think there's some of that too. Yeah. All right. Where are we at now?
Next is the 10th. Number 10 is dark journalist and Alana Freeland. Space Fence DNA Control Plan.
Total spectrum domination.
Yes, full spectrum dominance. And basically she was interviewing about her latest book which unfortunately is not in my little brief here, but that she, Elana, Elana, Free Land. And this is a book that is very heavily researched and, well done. And it's about how the original funds that went into the Strategic Defense Initiative under Reagan, or that was the program that
the SDI, right?
Right, SDI. And so, so what she says is that, when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, it was widely assumed that the SDI program would be abandoned. But in fact, it appears that it was reintegrated into a covert initiative for building the space fence, which would serve as a global surveillance and control grid. And what was missing in the 1980s to realize this vision came along in the 90s with the development of HAARP and the successful efforts to ionize the atmosphere. With
the chemtrails.
Yes. And with this being achieved over the last 2 decades, the conditions are perfect for the full deployment of the space fence and all of its terrifying implications of worldwide dominance over communications and a new paradigm of space being weaponized to control life on planet Earth. And of course, Trump's Space Force that I guess has to deal with this reality.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's the justification for publicly announcing probably something that was going on for a long time.
Yeah.
The battle is played on many levels, right?
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling. It goes so far. And I always say, people that are real human beings with an actual soul, a spirit within them, they never aspire to want to rule over anybody or control anybody. They just want to live a happy life with their family and friends.
Yeah.
But we have these psychopaths that always rise to the top and they promote each other. So that's how it works,
Well, and it's a whole system of compromise and blackmail.
Yeah.
Blackmail, and then you're compromised because of the blackmail. I mean, to start. And then
you got some that are just flat out, you don't need to compromise them because they're already there.
Yeah.
They just want to.
Cheap seats.
Yeah. They just want to, just be all that. They want to be rich, famous, powerful, all those things. And they'll just do anything literally to get it. And there's plenty of people who will gladly sell their soul for whatever piece of that pie they think they can get.
Right.
And that's why we have such a failure of humanity, is because people can be bought. Yep. And we see it. It's right in our face. And until and unless we can, as a society or as a world of human beings, however many there are of us, because I really question that, we've got to step up.
Absolutely. Well, I do it every day.
You do, and it's so appreciated. And tell people your website one more time, because I think everybody listening and everybody that's going to listen to the archive, you need to get on Alexandra's email list, because you're going to find out so much information. She knows how to cut through the BS and get to the good stuff.
The website is forbiddeknowledgetv.net, and there's a form right under the video screen for you to put your first name and your email address to subscribe. It's free. It's free for now. I mean, I hope I can keep it free.
Well, I'm hoping we can get more support for you financially on there as well. Something we touched on earlier, we were talking about the latest event, with the killing of this Iranian general. You mentioned somebody that had a sort of dissenting view.
Well, no, it's a very measured and balanced view. It came from a guy named Majid Nawaz, who's he's British of Pakistani Muslim descent. He was a radical Islamist, and he was studying Arabic and law. He's a lawyer, in England, but he's also, he was a double major, and one of his majors was Arabic, and so because of that, he was spending a year abroad in Egypt, and that happened to be right at the time of 9/11. And he was a member of a very radical, I'm forgetting the name of it, Islamist group that wanted to basically have Sharia law implemented worldwide. Mm-hmm. And they found out. So basically there was a sweep in Egypt after 9/11, and he ended up in jail, in Egyptian prison for 5 years. Even though he was born in the UK. And so he did get out, but while he was there, he read a lot, and he basically had a total change of heart. And didn't renounce Islam, but he did renounce radical Islam. And so what he has to say, he made an incredible Twitter thread yesterday that's called Analysis: Legitimate Liberal Concerns About Feared Iranian Military Escalation After Trump's Bold Gambit and My Considerations in Reaction. And so, people are complaining that Soleimani was in violation of international law, and what he says is that Trump designated the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terror group. So it's really no. I'm seeing that we have like half a minute left, so I don't know.
We got about a minute.
But basically, he's saying that people like in Syria, people all over the Middle East are celebrating the death of this guy who killed tens of thousands of Muslims all over the Middle East. And
there's always more to the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we've come to the end of another great show. Alexandra, thank you so much for sharing with us once again. I hope to have you on regularly so we can get updates. And it's a great way to start the new year with some excellent information. So everybody, please check out Alexandra online at forbiddenknowledgetv.net and sign up for her email blasts, which are wonderful. And with that in mind, I'd like to wish everybody a tremendous new year. And we hope that things will improve for all of us and all of humanity, and that we will see some justice. That's what we're hoping for anyway. So thank you so much, Alexandra.
Thank you. And just, I guess, a quick thing is that as hard and difficult as all of this is, it wouldn't be happening if Trump weren't elected, and we would just be living 9/11 over and over and over every day with no hope of freedom. So
absolutely true. I agree with that. So onward and upward, everybody. Thank you, Alexandra, once again. You've been listening to Inside the Matrix. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative, divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.